Hi, I'm coming to you a little differently today. Usually I'm at the gun range when I open up these videos and proceed through them. And even when I'm doing a talking video inside, I'll generally have some kind of trademark background behind me. Today, that's not what I'm doing. Today, I'm in my family room. This is my home here. My wife and I live here. Our grown kids come here to visit. Our grandkids come here to play. Our church group meets here. Friends come over. Our pets live here with us. And what I and my wife want to do, just like anybody across the United States wants to do, is when we go out into public every day, whether we're going to the store or to a mall, to some public open venue somewhere, or going to church, wherever it's going to be where we're in public, in crowds of people, what we want to be able to do is return home. And all too often today in America, people are going out into public but never returning home because they didn't live to do so, because of a mass shooter, because of a deranged monster who decided to walk in where they happen to be at that given moment and gun them down, with them being defenseless and unable to defend themselves or stop that from happening. You've already seen the title. You have a pretty good idea of what the subject is, so please bear with me though, because there's a lot of ground to cover here. And you may not be, I'm a Christian. I'm going to give a little Christian perspective going in, and whether you're a believer or not, if you're a gun owner, if you're a citizen of good conscience, I'm going to ask you to stick with me and give me a chance to give you perspective on why we are where we are today, and what we have, the point we've reached that is insurmountable in trying to deal with mass shooters. So stick with me. Let's get started here and give me a brief opportunity to lead you through how mankind degenerated to the point where we are today, where we're dealing with mass shooters who've lost their conscience. In Romans chapter 1, the Apostle Paul describes the progression of the depravity of mankind all the way from creation to the point where he was when he wrote what he wrote in Romans chapter 1. And that's a progression of depravity that from that point almost 2,000 years ago where the Apostle Paul wrote that to where we are today, it has continued. The depravity has continued to advance and progress to where we are today. The following verses summarize how far it can go in some people. And as we talk this, as I read this, think about mass shooters and what you see in mass shooters today, and the characteristics of what you see on the news and what you hear about these people. Think about that in light of what you're about to hear. This is Romans chapter 1, verse 28. This is late in the chapter, and this is what Paul writes. He said, even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind. Reprobate, it may say in a different version of the Bible, this is a New American Standard, it may say a defiled mind. It may have some other word to describe it, but what it indicates and what it shows is a mind that is devoid of conscience, a mind that has lost its conscience. It says God gave them over. They went so far and they became so depraved that it says God gave them over to it. He turned it over. He turned their mind over to them without touching them any further, without interfering with them any further, without sending anybody to help them any further. He let their mind go because they had become so depraved. The next verse, it says, being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, full of murder. In verse 29, a reprobate mind, a mind devoid of conscience, a person filled with murder, this says, with a reprobate mind, no conscience, filled with murder. Verse 30, backbiters, haters of God, disrespectful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things. Well, we have three things there in these verses, inventors of evil things. Put those three verses together and consider them in light of mass shooters. And what is stated in those verses is that God gave them over to a depraved or a reprobate mind, a mind devoid of conscience, filled with murder, inventors of evil things. And this is the formula that we have today. And finally, in the last two verses, verse 31, he says they're without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable, unmerciful. Take all those first three, that formula, they are unmerciful. They have no conscience, they have no empathy. There's nothing there in their conscience to stop them from doing what they do. Who, this is the end of it, knowing the judgment of God, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. An even greater depth of depravity. It's somebody that not only does these things, but takes pleasure in others that are doing the same thing. Our illustration today brings us to the horrific assault and slaughter of people at the Sweet 16 birthday party in Dadeville, Alabama in April of 2023. This goes outside, and obviously I am looking at my computer while I'm doing this because this, again, I don't usually have notes, but today I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss everything. I wanted to make sure this stayed in order. I wanted to make sure you hear this in a maximum capacity so that you fully understand why I put this up. But the illustration is that assault and slaughter of people at the Sweet 16 birthday party in Dadeville, Alabama. This was a departure from our usual mass shootings. Usually mass shootings statistically are done by an individual white male with some kind of deranged, distorted sense of reality without any conscience, just walking in and murdering people up one side and down the other, wherever they are, until they are either killed or they kill themselves, is the usual mass shooter. In this case, there were 6, possibly 7 suspects. All are black, all working together with planned intent, all carrying concealed handguns. What we're seeing a whole lot of is we're seeing people doing this with rifles. These young men did not do this with rifles. They did it with handguns. The ages of the known perpetrators were 15, 16, 17, 19, 20, and 20. These are 4 of the suspects, 4 of the 6 suspects, pictures of them. Here's what we want to go back to from Romans chapter 1. Who, knowing the judgment of God, they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. What we had here was 6 young men walking into a party with concealed handguns, loaded, ready to maim and kill in that Sweet 16 party. They walked in with an intent. They walked in with the intent to kill and murder, to maim and murder. They walked in with one taking pleasure in what each other one was doing. 6 of them together, perfectly illustrating what the Apostle Paul wrote about in the depravity of mankind. So we not only now have our mass shooters that are individual white males. It doesn't matter what color they are. We have individuals and groups just like this group that will now walk into a room of crowded people. We don't know why this happened yet. We'll probably find out this was some kind of retribution, some kind of gang thing, something that had to do with somebody in that party, or multiple somebodies in that party, making some of these young men mad, them all getting together and decided to go in there and just try to kill the whole group. No conscience, devoid of conscience is what we have here. And speaking of being devoid of any conscience, as I'm putting this video together, this just came through in a news report, is that 5 people are dead in a Texas shooting. A man was shooting in his backyard, apparently. The neighbors asked him to stop shooting in the backyard because he was keeping them awake, keeping the kids awake. So he took his gun, walked over to their house, walked into their house, 10 people in the house, and killed 5 of them, including an 8-year-old boy. This just came in while I was putting this together. And it says he was drunk. Said he had been drinking a lot of alcohol. Irrespective of the alcohol, devoid of any conscience. There are people all over the world that get drunk every day and don't go kill 5 people because they got irritated because they asked them to stop doing something. Absolute void conscience. A reprobate mind is what we have in every mass shooter today. It doesn't matter whether it's an individual mass shooter that walks in with some kind of distorted sense of reality to get vengeance or to carry out some kind of bizarre task or something. Or somebody like this who is so deranged and so maniacal that they would get mad at their neighbors, walk into their house and start killing people, including children. that these young men that you saw a picture of a few minutes ago would walk into a party full of kids and open fire and kill and maim countless people in that party. Each and every one of them, of these suspects, approving of what the others are doing and taking pleasure in it. No conscience, devoid of conscience. That's what we're dealing about, and that is what is insurmountable in trying to deal with these mass shooters. They cannot be dealt with. They cannot be helped. They cannot be ministered to. They must be stopped. And these people, with a conscience that is devoid of empathy, of conviction, of sympathy, it's those that are front and center and our biggest threats to American safety, meaning that it's up to Americans. It's up to Americans to determine how to stop them. Because clearly, when I say Americans, I'm talking about you and I. I'm talking about law-abiding gun owners. I'm talking about people with a conscience. I'm talking about good citizens. That's who it's up to decide how they're going to be stopped and determine how we're going to do that. Because obviously our governments at any level cannot get it done. I've been watching mass shootings for 40 years. From everything from every type of government suggestion and input, social input, even religious input, and it's gotten nothing but worse. These are consciences in people that are devoid of anything that regards human life as anything other than something to be snuffed out. They must be stopped. And we, lawful gun owners, should be the front line of defense, because we're the ones that are most likely to be on the scene when this type thing happens. Now, clearly anti-gun hysteria is always a barrier to properly securing any crowded venue. It's always a barrier to securing any crowded venue with the same tools in law-abiding hands that the monsters use to kill people. Because the first thing that happens, after you hear about a mass shooting, what's the first thing you hear? Gun control, ban this, ban this, ban that, ban this. There's no mention from that side of the aisle, anti-guns, that mentions let's secure crowds, let's secure schools, let's secure malls with the same tools that the monsters are using to walk in and kill people with impunity. Put them in law-abiding hands and let's secure those places so that those people are either prevented or stopped. But no, that never happens. It's always just ban the guns, ban the guns, ban the guns. 350 million guns in the United States. What a waste of breath when we could be securing every crowded venue, every school, with the tools in law-abiding hands that are needed to completely secure those areas and keep mass shooters from coming in and taking life with impunity. The anti-gun mantra always focuses on getting rid of guns rather than on getting rid of the mass shooters. And so here we are again going around in the same circles we've been going around in for 40 years. And the problem's only getting worse. So, to the point of the video, here is where you and I come in. Now, I live in a state where I can purchase guns legally, either from an FFL dealer or from another individual. And as somebody practicing capable with handguns, what is my responsibility in protecting those around me if a shooting should break out, which it obviously can in any state, in any location? What is my responsibility? And now, let me stop right here. Going forward in this, this is the only place I'm going to mention this. I understand all the implications of being involved in a shooting, of a mass shooting breaking out, you being there with your gun, drawing that gun and entering that type of a fight. Sometimes there may be no option other than to get out and escape. But with that gun, you may be able to get somebody else out. You may be able to lead other people to safety. You may be able to get people behind you and hold somebody off, hold that shooter off from a point of cover until law enforcement and reinforcements can arrive. Or you may actually have to stand up, take as much cover as you can, and enter into a firefight with that mass shooter. But the bottom line is, the best opportunity for it to ever happen will be with somebody that's ready with a gun on the spot when the shooting breaks out, stopping them on the spot. We've seen it happen. We've seen it happen numerous times with people competent with their handguns. We've seen these things kept from ever breaking out because somebody competent with a handgun pulled it and stopped that shooter. Now, what about those people who over the last few years, in particular here, have bought millions of handguns for their own protection because they became concerned about the world that we live in general? They bought handguns, and after some initial help from somebody shooting a couple boxes of ammo through them, they've taken them home, put them in a box, put them in a drawer, stuck them somewhere, and meaning to do something with them, but have gone on now for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever, and have never pulled them out again. Have refused to go out and have anything to do with practicing with that gun, training with the gun, getting a holster, and being able to carry that gun responsibly. What about that? How much good will they be in protecting themselves, their families, innocent bystanders, if a shooting breaks out where they are? How much good would they be with no gun, because they never have learned to shoot it competently, handle it, draw it from a holster, or carry it competently? What a waste. Now, you're watching this. This is not the intent of this is not to offend anybody, but I got to ask, what about you? Do you have your gun? Is it ready? Have you practiced with it? Have you practiced picking it up? Have you practiced drawing it? Practiced firing it? Practiced carrying it? If you're out at a crowded place where a shooter begins randomly firing at people, maiming and killing, how are you going to do? How are you going to do? If you don't have your gun, without your gun, how much use would you be to yourself, your family, to innocent bystanders? Without your gun, would you be able to escape? Would you be able to lead your family to safety with the possibility of fighting back if you had to? Would you be able to lead others to safety, protecting them with your firearm? No. You'd be useless. You'd have to hide if you were able to, or you'd have to shrink into a corner, hoping that somehow that shooter would pass you by. Or you might have to put on a brave face, getting ready to die as you watch your family, friends, bystanders die in front of you before you're killed yourself, because you had no gun with you. For the people that have bought guns and they're sitting at home in a box somewhere, they're not doing anything with them, not developing their skills, not learning how to handle it, not learning how to use it from a holster, not learning how to carry. This is all it would take to be responsible enough to be carrying a gun to protect yourself and anybody around you should a shooting break out. Over my shoulder you can see a couple of simple targets set up, cardboard on some wood and some PVC. That's all anybody would need to come out and practice with their guns. It's that simple. Those type of targets doing this right here. It's that simple, yet they refuse to do it. Always have something more important than carrying a gun that they could potentially protect their life, their family's life with, or even stop a mass shooting. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Your gun, a couple boxes of ammo, 2 or 3 targets, some practice, a couple times a month. Handling, holstering, shooting, carrying. It's all it takes to give you and anybody around you a fighting chance should you ever be in a location where a mass shooter breaks out. But you have to have your gun with you, and you have to be ready to use it. Mass shootings, if they're ever going to be effectively stopped or prevented from ever happening, it's going to be up to us. It's time to stop acting like it's everybody else's job. We are the front line, but only if we have our gun with us.